Happy Monday morning, everybody. It's Misha. We're going to talk about hypertension this morning. It's one thing that I like to talk about. I keep rounding back to because it's so important. And it's one cardiovascular diseases are one of the leading causes of death worldwide. And when we look at the fact that 80% of cardiovascular deaths are linked to long-term hypertension, and then understanding that hypertension is 95% caused, lifestyle related hypertension is caused by insulin resistance, a metabolic disorder. That was a mouthful. Welcome in. I'm not a doctor, not a nutritionist. I'm a real world woman. Yes, I worked in medical for a long time, but I wasn't getting help. Doctors weren't figuring it out. I was on multiple medications. My heart was failing. I was in fear that I wasn't going to live to see 65. I'm now 60. And it was a miserable experience to live through, constantly worrying about it. Only so many trips you can make to the emergency room because your blood pressure is 180 over 150 and they're not giving you any help. So at some point, at least for me, I gave up and just stopped going into the doctor because I'd been there before, done that. So I don't know how many of you guys suffer with hypertension, even low-grade hypertension of 130 over 80 or higher is hypertension, or are even concerned about your heart. And so the message today is, again, we're going to talk about some different ways that insulin resistance is causing it so you can understand it. I am going to talk about the protocol that I used to help get mine back under control. And I'm going to do it a little differently today because each point I'm going to stop and talk about the system and how it's specifically helping that point. Because understanding insulin resistance is one thing, but understanding why this protocol is helping so many people around the world, just like me, get their hypertension under control, why we have a cardiologist who's referring it to all of his patients now. I think that's important for you to understand what's really happening with hypertension. Now, behind all of that, full stop, is my need to share this. I said a little prayer before I came live because my whole goal and hope is that I find the people who need the message and get that to them so that they don't end up where I am. I have been experiencing a weakened heart and all of the stuff that goes along with that. And it's been pretty scary. In getting my insulin resistance under control stopped the progression, but it doesn't mean that that whole heart healed automatically. Now we're on a journey to heal my heart, and some of the same principles that I'm going to talk about that stopped my hypertension are what's going to be helping heal my heart. So if this sounds like you, then stick around. Am I a doctor? So Debbie, thanks for that question. I opened up the live and you probably weren't in here when I said I'm not a doctor, I'm not a nutritionist. I'm a real world woman who worked in medical offices, had close friendships with doctors, went to many, many doctors for my hypertension, and none of them could get it under control. The one protocol that I'm going to talk about this morning is what got my hypertension under control. And so much so that my doctor and I are now on opposite sides of the United States. But she's called me and said, "Wow, I'm so happy that you found something." She's endorsed the messages I give. So no, and you don't have to be a doctor to understand when something is not working in the healthcare system. Okay, so there's tons of research. This is a different day and age than we ever used to be. I was listening to a doctor pick on a podcaster and call it go to Dr. Google now. But the truth is, if you actually sit down and look for reputable papers and information, you'll find it. Now, one of the reputable places that I find for the information is this book, Why We Get Sick. This is where I always start. He lists all the papers in there. He lists a number of the resources that I talk about. This book, who is it? Dr. Ben Bickman. He's one of the top metabolic scientists in the world. His job is to look at fat cells in petri dishes every day and figure out what's going on metabolically with our health. I've gotten to meet him and talk with him. I have both of his books. And by the way, as I talk about the protocol, I'm going to kind of pre-drop something. I'm working with the publishers of the book, and he has a new book out called How Not to Get Sick, where he details some of the information that he has in the bigger book, but then he gives you exercise and diet plans working with a nutritionist. So The publishers have said we can do a drawing. So anyone who orders from me this month, whether you're currently ordering or whether you're a new person ordering, you're going to get put into a drawing. And at the end of the month, we'll announce a winner of who gets a free copy of How Not to Get Sick. And I'm going to see if we can do a similar thing for the Why We Get Sick. But that's where the most of my information comes from. And then I go find the research papers and then I kind of expand on that. So Dr. Bickman is amazing, and he's actually traveling around the world educating doctors on insulin resistance and all of these things, many of the things I talk about. So I hope that gives that answer. And thanks for asking, because I never want to mislead anyone. I want you to know, though, we eat ourselves into disease. Then menopause, Dr. Marie Haver and Dr. Mosconi. Okay, so let me check out them, because I listen to a lot of doctors. And believe it or not, I listen to doctors on both sides of the fence, because I've listened to doctors like Canberry, who are predominantly carnivore. And then I've listened to doctors or scientists like Dr. Will Bolsowitz, who's plant-based, right? So I try to take all of that information and just make sense of the most of it, because it gets to be a big confusing world out there. So I kind of do a combination of, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. And my thing is, the protocol that I'm going to talk to you about, whether you're a Will Bolsowitz type person where you're just plant-based, this fits. It's plant-based. Whether you're somebody who's more carnivore and you just are worried about getting enough prebiotics and support into your system, this fits for that. If you're just kind of middle of the road and don't really ascribe to either one, the protocol fits. So the bottom line, the protocol is made to fit regardless of what your dietary restrictions or inclinations happen to be. Okay. So we do eat ourselves in diseases. So I'm talking about hypertension this morning predominantly, right? We're going to talk about a number of things. Whatever you guys want is what we're going to talk about. But I do have prepared a lot of information about hypertension so you can understand that, because it's so important to me, because I don't want anyone else at the young age of 60 laying in bed worried that they're going to pass away before amazing things happen with their family, and that their heart is just weakened to the point where it's unrecognizable, like mine has been. So we're going to talk about it, because I'm on it. And now I've stopped the hypertension. Now we're healing up my heart so that I can live to be 100, 120 years old and enjoy my family. All right. So thank you. Welcome in, everybody. Welcome, Nelda. Good morning. Thank you for joining my lives and listening in. All right, you guys, let's get to it. Dr. Allo, cardiologist, discusses carnivore. And you guys, there's so much. Before I dive into all the heart stuff, there's some new information like on K2 that I've just learned. But there's a lot of information out there where, how many of you guys have heard, Debbie, thank you for that, because I think there's just this big notion out there that I know that there's this big notion out there, because my kids even do it. They're like, oh, we can't eat so much red meat because cholesterol, because this, that. Pooey. None of that is true. So the more recent research is showing that eating red meats can actually be healthy for your heart, and we'll discuss that later. But there's a lot of newer science out there that's showing this. Some of the things that we know now, or that we've been taught now, that we've been kind of passed down, some of those ideologies were never really scientifically proven. They were presuppositions that just kind of took hold, and the food market ran with it. Because look, when we reduce fats and protein in our diet, we stay more hungry. We eat more carbohydrates, which are all the bag box barcoded foods that are in the grocery store. And when we're eating mostly carbohydrates, we're having more insulin resistance, and we're having more disease and problems. And then we get passed off for medications or more supplements or this or that or the other thing. So it's this big cycle that happened when they said, ooh, if we take fat out of the system and we take this high amount of protein out, we can sell more food because people aren't going to get satiated. And then along the way, what happened was, I love when people call me and I tell them to text first. So, all right, let's just move on with this. Okay, So let's dive into it because there's a number of ways. I usually talk about 5 ways. This morning, I'm going to talk about 5 ways. A couple of them overlap. I'm going to give you a couple of bonuses. We're going to talk about how the Feel Great system, the protocol that I use, actually addresses each one of these mechanisms that insulin resistance is causing hypertension. So hang on, ask questions if you have them. Let's get this information out so you guys can start to feel better. But what I was starting to ask before I got distracted, you guys have ADD. So when my phone goes off and it's supposed to be on do not disturb right now, it throws me off. But how many of you guys are suffering with or know someone who's suffering with hypertension? And remember, hypertension, you guys, is 130 over 80 or higher. And I know a lot of people think 130 or 80 over higher is not that bad. But that still is hypertension, and that still is causing a load on your heart that's damaging your heart every day you're living with that hypertension. And so it's not just getting the hypertension down, it's preserving your heart so that you can have a quality of life throughout life. Now, one of the things I just saw a message that I sent my son a couple of days ago, and I was like, son, take care of your body now. Don't think I'm invincible. I got this. I'm going to do it. It's not affecting me because that's where I was. I remember when my daddy was this age and he was talking to me about some of these things and I just didn't pay attention because I thought I'm invincible. Nothing bothers me. Whatever. That happens to everybody else. Now I'm dealing with the reality of that it did happen to me and I don't want that to happen to someone else. Okay. So, post-menopause, blood pressure, sleep apnea. Oh yeah. Okay, now I'm not gonna cha-cha. Okay, I'm cha-cha-cha. Okay, so post-menopause, your blood pressure is up, you have sleep apnea, all the above. That's classic insulin resistance. The one thing that's linked to all of those things that you mentioned, including the hypertension that I'm going to talk about, is insulin resistance. Insulin resistance is not needed. We don't need medications to fix it. We need to understand the root cause and how the mechanisms that are going on, and so how we can deal with that. Before I dive into the heart, I want to just say this with insulin resistance. Insulin resistance is this disease where we're eating too much food that's turning into glucose, and that glucose is energy for our cells. When our body senses this rise in glucose in our bloodstream, more than 1 teaspoon in our entire bloodstream, it cues the brain to tell the pancreas to say, hey, we need insulin. Insulin is the transport. So why does this happen? Because when we have glucose in the system, it's got to get into the cells. It's energy, but it's energy that's just floating around in our blood vessels, and unless it gets into the cells, it's useless, and it actually gets kind of thick and sticky and starts causing damage inside the vessels. So we got to get it out of the bloodstream and into the cells. Insulin does that job, and every single cell in the body has an insulin receptor on it. Now, with insulin resistance, when we're eating so much that we're increasing our blood glucose all the time, insulin stays high, and now we have insulin resistance going on in the body. That was a big jump, right? So, and now we have insulin resistance because when insulin is so high all the time, the cells are like, okay, insulin, great, you brought me energy, thank you so much. But then insulin, like 5 minutes later, is knocking on that door again, like I've got another package for you, and the cell's like, oh, okay, all right, maybe this time. And then the next time, 5 minutes later, insulin's knocking on the door, and then the cells are like, no, no, now you're becoming a nuisance. I don't want it anymore. So some cells stop taking in the clues from insulin to deliver that energy package. There's a number of reasons why that can happen. I'll talk about that on another time. But that's insulin resistance, when the cells are resistant to taking in the energy you've eaten. Now you're eating and you're getting in glucose and energy, but you feel tired all the time. You feel exhausted and you feel hungry because the cells aren't getting in the insulin that they need to get the energy in. Insulin is the transport. The energy of glucose is what it's trying to get into the cells. Okay. A couple other things about insulin resistance before we move on. Insulin is anabolic. It wants things to grow. So it's a primary hormone, and it is a hormone in the body. It links into your estrogen, testosterone, your thyroid, your leptin, your ghrelin, cortisol even, but it takes precedence over most all of those and how they're relating in your body. So insulin resistance is happening body wide. If it's happening in one area, it's happening in all areas. We have to get that insulin down, and it being anabolic, wanting things to grow, means it's not going to allow you to burn fat for fuel, break down fat, get rid of any of those cells that are damaged and need to go. So we're going to talk about how this all works. Okay. Thank you guys for questions, and we're going to jump in. So now everybody understand insulin resistance just a little bit, because that was, oh, and possible lesion in pancreas. Oh, cha cha cha. So I am not a doctor, can't diagnose. My mind immediately went to the fact that you may be putting too much. Lesions in the pancreas often happen when the pancreas is overworking. So I can't diagnose, not even trying to diagnose, but my mind also automatically goes to the fact that, wow, we need to start addressing insulin resistance and give the pancreas some relief. The pancreas doesn't just produce insulin, it produces some other hormones like the component glucagon. And when you're highly insulin resistant, you can be glucagon resistant as well, meaning the body's not only putting out too much insulin when you're in a fed state, but it could be putting out way too much glucagon that it can't respond to in an unfed state. And now your pancreas, your poor pancreas, is just overworking. I hope you get answers for that, but I'm going to encourage you, cha-cha-cha, along with whatever your doctors tell you, start getting your insulin resistance under control. Okay, so now back to the heart, because the heart of the matter, that's what we're here for, right? So I have some notes, guys, because there is some new information from me, and this is one of my favorite topics. I feel like I could talk about this with my eyes closed because it affected my life so much. Normally I start with the endothelial cells, and we'll get to those in a minute, but I'm going to start with the sympathetic nervous system today. So again, ask questions, and we're going to talk about each one of these mechanisms right now. Understand insulin resistance. Now, what insulin resistance does to your sympathetic nervous system is it causes the system to become overactive. So normally, insulin helps your blood vessels relax and controls how much sodium your kidneys absorb. Okay, so part of this whole sympathetic nervous system is you have, and this is where the don't have salt if you have hypertension comes in. And you guys, when you get the insulin resistance under control, salt's no longer an issue. I want you to understand that sugar is the issue, salt not so much. They're addressing the secondary cause because the primary cause hasn't been addressed. All right, so we're going to talk about that. So this high amount of sugar causing a high amount of insulin causes your kidneys to not let go of sodium at the rate they should. So now you're holding on to this sodium. This is a sympathetic nervous system action. You're holding on to sodium. With that, that means that your blood vessels are not as flexible and you have way more pressure in there because too much fluid is being held into your system. That's action number one with insulin resistance. So what really happens when you have that malfunction with the sympathetic nervous system is that you increase your heart rate, you have narrowed blood vessels because they're not as flexible, and you have that more retention of sodium, meaning more retention of water. Good morning, D. Durham. I love seeing your name pop up. Love seeing your name pop up. So, and welcome in everyone else. Nicole, Ray, you guys, thank you for dropping in. All right, so those things happen and they raise your blood pressure. So what is really woo, I have way too many notes here. Okay, so that's happening. The Feel Great system. How is this system, which is a tea that I have in the morning, a tea I have in the afternoon, and this pre-meal drink, how did this help with that specific action? Well, what happens is the system improves your insulin sensitivity. Both pieces of the protocol work together to enhance insulin sensitivity. Balance has a unique fiber blend that slows down glucose absorption. So now less glucose being absorbed into the bloodstream means less need for insulin. So the insulin level comes down, okay? Reducing those sudden sugar spikes that can lead to insulin resistance is how this is helping in one way. But Unimate is rich in bioactive compounds from yerba mate, and that also has been shown to improve insulin signaling. So now balance is reducing the glucose, and we have impaired insulin signaling throughout the body that's causing all this salt retention. The Unimate actually helps improve that insulin signaling, allowing that energy to get into the cells. Okay, so that's important to understand. You don't know what to eat. We're going to talk about that at the very end of this, Georgia girl. Basically, here's the thing. if this let's talk about this really, really quickly. I'll give you a quick answer, and then if you want to stick around to the end and we'll get a better answer. But what you want to do is start eating more whole foods. Get away from bagged, boxed, bar-coded foods. That's step number one. By understanding that the foods we eat do not have the nutrients that they used to have in them, and understanding that there is some supplementation necessary for most of us, that's what this does. And so I eat whatever I want. I just make sure that I'm getting in the nutrients I need. You're scared to eat. Oh, this is true. I've been there, Georgia girl. I've been there. So let's finish this up because it doesn't have to be that scary, you guys. It doesn't have to be. And when we start to understand what's really causing the problem, it gets much easier. So hang out with me, Georgia girl, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. Okay, so we're back to this sympathetic nervous system reaction, but it's not just that insulin sensitivity. We're stabilizing the blood sugars with the fiber, and then this fiber is not only slowing down how much sugar it gets into the system, but how quickly it gets into the system. And that reduced absorption of sugar and making it more time released helps with the whole problem of insulin resistance and the blood sugar spikes in the first place. And then the Unimate, of course, it's helping you get that energy into the cells, especially in a fasted state. So now we have something that really works. Plus, it's helping with weight management. Let's go back to the top, and so we're going to talk about sympathetic nervous system. Now we're talking about more about the sodium retention. Okay, so insulin helps control how your kidneys handle sodium. Remember, salt or sugar, it's really the sugar. Start addressing the sugar, and the salt's not going to be so much of an issue. Okay, so when the kidneys cannot offload that salt, you're just retaining more water, which is increasing your blood pressure, and it's causing stress to your kidneys. So now you're having not only heart problems, but you're likely having some kidney problems because your kidneys are working too hard as well. And again, in the same ways, the Feel Great system is helping with that, reducing the blood glucose spikes, helping you be more insulin sensitive throughout this whole process. This is another one that's kind of dealing with the sodium retention. So these are big words. The renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system, RAAS, activation. Insulin resistance activates this renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system, and that helps control blood pressure. But the result of this activating it too much means increased production of hormones that raise blood pressure, more sodium retention than we're already experiencing, and increased blood volume again. So again, we're addressing that with the system by keeping those blood sugars low, keeping the insulin levels low, helping insulin sensitivity with the Unimate. But it's also helping with your weight, and that's going to help you with your heart. It also has antioxidant. The system has antioxidant protection in it. That it's rich in polyphenols and other antioxidants that may help with this RAAS induced oxidative stress. Oxidative stress. Okay, we hear a lot about oxidative stress. Oxidative stress really is the process in which your body is breaking stuff down. Okay, so too much, just like anything else, too much of that breakdown is damaging. Too little is damaging. We have to have some breakdown and turnover of cells, some breakdown of glycogen stores and all these other fat stores that we have in the body to return them to energy in the body. So we need some oxidation of fat cells. The problem is that we're ending up with oxidative stress throughout the body with insulin resistance, and that leads to inflammation, which is leading to more disease across the board, not just the heart. So the Feel Great system is helping with that oxidative stress. It has antioxidant and anti-inflammatory properties in it, helping get those blood sugars down and helping get the insulin levels down so that we're less likely to experience negative oxidative stress. So oxidation needs to happen in our body, but when it's too much, when we're having too much of it, that's when we start to have stress and we start to have all of these other issues happening. insulin resistance is causing oxidative stress in the body in a number of ways, but it's affecting your heart because now your heart's beating faster, your cortisol is up, and you're unable to get rid of that salt. Now your heart is really struggling. So there's that. But then one of my favorite things that I talk about is endothelial dysfunction, okay? So endothelial dysfunction, that's some big words, right? And they were big for me too. So let's just narrow that down. Your blood vessels are made up of layers, okay? One of the innermost layers of the cell, besides the protective layer called the internum, is called your endothelium. And that makes up a thickened part of the blood vessel wall. And in a normal state, that wall can expand and contract. It can produce something called nitric oxide. It is your blood brain barrier, and everything is working fine. With insulin resistance, opposite to everything else that's happening, some cells will take in too much insulin, meaning they're growing and they're doing too much. They're just doing too much all the time. So the endothelium, those endothelial cells, the innermost lining of your blood vessels, are taking in too much insulin. Now a lining that's maybe this thick starts to get really, really thick. So now we take some pressure or volume that should be going through, we're going to use an analogy, say the size of a fire hose. Now, because that inner wall is thickened, it doesn't grow out and leave the inner space small or inner space the same. It starts to narrow down that inner space. Now we have something the size of a garden hose. So now you're trying to take the pressure of a fire hose and push it through the size of a garden hose because the endothelium took up too much insulin because we have insulin present all the time and they thickened up. Now that thickening means that the endothelium is not functioning like it should. So with that, it can't produce that nitric oxide. Nitric oxide allows your blood vessels to relax and open up when they need to. So it allows that pressure to go through more or less impeded. But in insulin resistance, that can't happen. Nitric oxide isn't being produced in levels that allow those blood vessels to loosen up. And so now your pressure is building. Increased water retention, increased sympathetic nervous system, increased cortisol. Now your blood vessels are are too narrow inside and can't open up, and you have this building blood pressure going on. But how does the feel great system help with that? So what's really happening with this is by improving insulin sensitivity with the system, you may help insulin mediated nitric oxide production because we're slowing down that insulin level. So the endothelium isn't eating up too much energy and it can start to be normal again. Just like when we eat too much and we get overweight, when we start regulating what we eat, we thin down. And the same thing happens with the endothelium. Yeah, it swells everything shut. Insulin resistance swells everything shut. That's an amazing statement, Justin. Thanks for saying that because I've never heard anyone say it that way, but I think you're absolutely right. I think you're absolutely right, Justin. So now with the endothelium, what's happening with the system, right? So the fiber is helping stabilize those blood glucose levels so we don't have as much insulin, and now the endothelium can breathe and relax and they don't feel like they got to party so hard and they start to become normal functioning cells again, right? But Unimate also helps that because it's helping the insulin sensitivity so that we're getting in the right amounts of insulin in the cells that need it, and then there's just not as much for these endothelium who are hungry little critters to take it up. But we also have the antioxidant properties of Unimate that are helping that stress be reduced inside those cells. So yerba mate provides that potent antioxidant support, and those can really help protect the endothelium from oxidative damage, breakdown. So I just had to read a note I made. Okay. But we're also addressing cholesterol levels. Now, cholesterol isn't one of these 5 things, but I'm gonna talk about it today because there's a lot about cholesterol, and I want you to understand that my search to help my heart, part of it is making sure that I have plaques out of my system, that I'm not building up more cholesterol in my system, all of these things. So I'm gonna talk about that internum in a little bit, but we wanna talk about a couple of things. So the system is really helping regulate cholesterol levels, so you're less likely to build up that in your system. Now, I hear it all the time, and I learned this too. How many of you guys think that fats are causing your cholesterol problem? Bless Ansel Keys and his presupposition years and years and years ago, but we've all been taught, at least I was, that fat is what causes that cholesterol in our bloodstream, right? That fat, that dietary fat, is what's clogging our arteries. And oh my God, don't eat the yolks in your eggs. Cut the fat off of your meat. Buy lean everything. Buy low fat everything. Do all of that. And that's going to help your heart health. Well, isn't it interesting that our heart health overall has gotten worse with those recommendations? What I want you to understand real quick right here is that cholesterol is not in the dietary cholesterol that we're eating in the form of egg yolks, and some of these fats are not the cause of the cholesterol that's causing the dams in your body. Sugars are causing that cholesterol, and I'll explain why in a minute, in a few minutes. Okay. At the very end, remind me, we're going to come back to the internum. We're going to talk about cholesterol. We're going to talk about plaque buildup and how insulin resistance is contributing to that inside your blood vessels. But understand that sugar is the cause of cholesterol in the blood vessels, not the fats that you're eating. And more doctors are realizing that eating healthy fats, healthy amounts of healthy fats, regardless of calories, is going to help your heart. Okay. So no longer do you have to, like, when you start getting your insulin resistance under control, when you start getting it under control, you don't have to worry about, oop, I can't have salt. You don't have to worry about, oop, I have to buy everything low fat. You can eat real food and be extremely healthy. Okay. So the system is also helping reduce free fatty acids. So elevated free fatty acids are associated with endothelial dysfunction and vasoconstriction. And by helping lower those free fatty acids, the Feel Great system can help improve endothelial dysfunction. Now, the Unimate actually has um, anti-inflammatory, but so does Balance. It has anti-inflammatory or low-grade inflammation associated with insulin resistance. These two products can help with that. Um, Inflammation is a key contributor to endothelial dysfunction, and by addressing the inflammation, helping get that down through addressing sugars, the Feel Great system is helping oxidation, inflammation, and keeping those cells properly insulin sensitive. So the system is helping, like in real ways, the system is helping with all of that. So it also has, there are some studies that are suggesting that compounds found in yerba mate may have direct beneficial effects on endothelial function. We do need to do more research, but emerging research shows that this yerba mate, and the drink that I'm drinking has 375 times some of these components as a standard bagged yerba mate, but they can really help with all of this endothelial dysfunction. So one of the last ones we're going to talk about, and then I do want to go back to cholesterol, is this whole oxidative stress and inflammation issue, right? So insulin resistance creates an environment where oxidative stress is increased, and inflammation is also increased in your body. And that means you have more harmful molecules called reactive oxygen species, or ROS, produced in your system. It increases levels of inflammatory substances, and those factors damage blood vessels and increase the blood pressure again. So these are some different things that I normally talk about, you guys, but you want to understand that insulin resistance is causing all of this: salt retention, water retention, blood vessels that can't open up, endothelium that's too thick, endothelium that's not producing the right things and being the right barrier to the brain that we need. And all of this is meaning an oxidative stress and inflammation. All of this just means that your heart is working way too hard to get blood flow to the rest of the body. With hypertension, you're not getting proper blood flow to the body as well. And so now we start to see a lot of other issues along with that heart working too hard. Because taking care of your heart is one of the best things you can do for your overall health. And taking care of the hearts that are having issues today is as simple for most of us as addressing insulin resistance. It doesn't take a bunch of statin drugs. It doesn't take water pills. It doesn't take all of that stuff for most of us. It takes understanding this root cause that caused all of this damage in the first place so that we don't have to lean on medications. We can just understand that addressing our dietary needs is key. And we're going to go over some of that in a minute. And it's simpler than you guys think. I know there's all of these things out there and it gets convoluted and complicated, and we want to simplify that today. But oxidative stress and inflammation is increased in your body with insulin resistance. And what that means is you have more harmful molecules called those reactive oxygen species. And then you have increased levels of inflammatory substance. And then those factors damage the blood vessels and increase blood pressure. So this leads into the internum, right? So this oxidative stress and inflammation. Okay, so there's some big words in here. Just kind of try and hold on to the bigger part of this message. So the internum, this little thin layer inside your blood vessels, is right on top of the endothelium. When there's too much sugar in the system, in the blood vessels, and it can't get out into the other cells because we're eating so much bag boxed barcoded foods all the time, it starts to create tears in that internum. Now we're going to get into cholesterol. Remember, tears in the internum. This little thin mucousy layer inside the blood vessels gets tears in it. Now we're going to talk about what happens with cholesterol and what's going on with your blood pressure. So with cholesterol, when we have high levels of insulin, our brain cues the body to produce more of a type B LDL, or low density lipoprotein. We have a couple of different types. There's more than two types, but we're going to talk about these two types, type A and type B. So type A is this really big, buoyant, bouncy, kind of fluffy type of lipoprotein. And it just kind of bounces through the bloodstream, not just kind of like I hate to say it that way, but the picture that just came through my head was Dumb and Dumberer, just bouncing through life without a care, not really causing a whole lot of damage, but not, just out there. But then it also, what happens is with insulin resistance, it's cueing the body to produce more of the type B LDL. Type B is small and really dense. Type B is really beneficial because it's what goes in and sinks into the blood vessels and plugs up those gaps or those holes so that your blood vessels start to work more normally. It's healing to them. But with insulin resistance, we're producing too much of that. And we have this system where we have too much sugar in the bloodstream causing little tears in the internum. Now, with the excess LDLB, LDLB, the small, dense one, is dense and heavy. It sinks in and it wants to go to those little tears. But the tears in the internum now, because of sugar, are so big that the LDLB is not just plugging them, it's seeping in and underneath that little layer inside the blood vessels. And now it's causing this dam where more LDL is getting in that tear underneath that internum. And that's where plaque starts to build up because you're getting this buildup of LDLB inside the blood vessels that are already thickened and can't open up, and they're constricted, and you have cortisol that levels that are high, and it's increasing your blood pressure all the time. Now we're adding to the problem with these little tears caused by the sugar in the system and the LDL caused by the excess insulin that are going in and causing these little dams. If you can think about it, the inner layer of the blood vessel, the endothelium, and this other layer, the internum, and now that LDLB is going inside of this internum and creating this big gapped up blockage. Okay, sugar is causing that problem. Fats are not causing this problem. Sugar is causing the problem. So those are several ways that insulin resistance is causing, and the key ways that your hypertension happens in the first place. And they're all linked back to insulin resistance. The Feel Great system is helping because, again, oxidative stress, there's antioxidants in it, anti-inflammatories in it, anti-cancer properties in it. The Unimate is helping you be more insulin sensitive. And all that means is the cells that need the energy are getting the energy in. And so there's less of this excess energy to go either into your fat cells or cells like the endothelium that are taking up too much. Um, this is interesting because it leads into also that whole taking up too much. By the way, little caveat is skin tags and the acanthosis nigricans or dark skin patches. Too much insulin going to those cells. So we really want to just regulate that. And the Feel Great system is helping because it's helping you reduce those blood sugar spikes. It's helping you become more sensitive to insulin. It's giving you energy, antioxidants, anti-inflammatories, and that's why it's key. Now, somebody this last week wrote me and said, "Hey, I want the system, but it's kind of expensive, and my, naturopath told me to use berberine." And I've been doing some studies on berberine, just berberine, and what I'm finding is that there's a lot of conflicting information about berberine and how effective it can actually be in the human body. And like many other things, like D3 needs K2, and we're going to talk about K2 in a minute. Magnesium needs chromium, chromium needs magnesium. So when we have just one thing go into the body, it may not be being absorbed and be as effective as we're told. And this is what they're finding with berberine, is that there's a lot of really good stuff being said, and I'm not going to say that it's bad, but it alone is not showing the relief for a number of these issues that people have been supposing or reporting. And this is where we get into the rats versus human debate about science. There are some mechanisms, and we have to lean on scientists to know which mechanisms are very much similar in rats to humans, but then we also have to know what mechanisms are not the same from rats to humans. And this is one of the places. Berberine just is not metabolized by the body as easily as in the human body as, say, in rat populations. So we need to make sure that we have complete sources to help this, and that's exactly what the system is providing. The balance has components of berberine in it, but it also has 7 different soluble and insoluble fibers that are giving you a matrix and a complete approach. So it's like saying you can drive your car and put gas in it, never address the brakes, never put oil in, never change the headlights. You're just going to put gas in that car and you're going to run the car and it's going to last you for a long time. That's kind of what some of these other suggestions are doing. We need to have a complete approach, and that's what the system does, is gives us that complete approach of addressing blood sugars and lipids and slowing down that absorption into the body. So now somebody asked about D3. D3 and K2. So if you're just taking D3, you're not getting it. It's not as bioavailable as when it's combined with K2. What I am going to encourage everyone to understand is that almost everything in life is like a yin yang situation. There's always two sides to everything. There's never just one simple mechanism that is the end all be all. Like, right? We have day, we have night, we have light, we have dark, we have all of this stuff. Like our trees need sunlight and they need darkness. They need times when they're growing and absorbing that, and then they have times when they're resting. And our bodies are the same. We have to have complete components. We have to have a complete approach in order for us to start actually feeling better. Now, D3 does a lot for our metabolism, our energy, our brains, but if we don't have it in combination with K2, we're just not getting the metabolization of that D3 like we should. Now, interestingly enough, K2, I was listening to a doctor, and there's no scientific study yet out about this, but this doctor added K2 to his diet, and just really focused on making sure he was getting K2 in his diet, and stopped the plaque from building in his arteries, and actually reversed some of the plaque in his arteries, so that at 60 something years old, his arteries now, by increasing K2 and eating predominantly carnivore, his blood vessels are now about the age of a 58-year-old. So 10 years younger than his actual age. And he did that with K2, but he also admits that you have to have D3. Okay. So K2 can help with this, according to what he's done for himself, can help with this plaque in your arteries. So obviously work with your doctor because some people have blood clotting issues and are on medications that K2 is just not going to be congruent with. But understand that there is some emerging work being done that shows that K2 can help with arterial plaques. Okay. But K2 is the same thing as D3. If you're taking in the K2 and not taking in the D3, you're not getting in the absorption. So we actually have a product that's not the Feel Great system. It's called Bone Fortify. It has calcium, magnesium. I said chromium, didn't I? Calcium and magnesium go together. And that has D3 and K2. So it helps me sleep, it helps my heart, and it's giving me all of those really positive components. And hopefully, because I haven't had my arteries looked at recently, but hopefully that K2 is helping reduce the plaques in my arteries. So I'm paying attention to nutrition and then I'm getting in those proper supplements for my particular concerns. And if you have heart concerns, again, work with your cardiologist to find out what medications you're on and if K2 is appropriate for you. We have a supplement that gives you that in the best bioavailable form that you can get, that I'm aware of right now. And I use that alongside the Feel Great system. But the core is a tea in the morning, antioxidants, anti-inflammatories, a tea in the afternoon, energy in spades, by the way, and then a pre-meal drink before my biggest meal with carbohydrates. And that's it. That's what took my blood pressure from 180 over 150 down to 112 over 70. And I'm off of all medications. So here's the other thing. I'm going to just preempt. Some people will be like, oh, $5 a day is too much. And I'm not bashing anyone because you guys, when I started and I looked at $5 a day, the overall cost of that, I was like, holy crap, there's no way I can afford this. But in the back of my mind, with the way my health was, I was like, there's no way I can't afford it. It has a 90-day money back guarantee. Give it 90 days. And if your health doesn't change in the way that you want it to in 90 days, you get your money back. You get the same price I get for it. And you have this quality guarantee where they test it at 3 points during the manufacturing process to make sure that you're getting the product that we tell you you're getting. And by the way, I didn't know this, but in a lot of those big clearinghouses, they get so many botanicals in, and some look and feel very similar to the ones you want. And so oftentimes, when you're not getting this triple testing, you're not getting the product you think you're getting. You think you're getting something that's very similar, but not the product you thought you were getting. And that's unfortunate that that happens with supplements, but it does. So this is triple tested. You know that you're getting the botanicals that we say you're getting. You know that you're getting the components that we're telling you you're getting, or it just doesn't go out to you. And that's all important. But $5 a day. I was spending about 130 a month on medications, 13 medications, about $10 a copay, plus all the doctor's visits and whatnot. I haven't been to the doctor outside of my annual visit a year ago. And that's a difference for me because I was at the doctor's twice a month, every month, trying to figure out my health and save my life. So you guys, is $5 a day more expensive for me? No, it's saving me money. I'm not spending money on all those big box barcoded foods anymore, and I'm paying attention to my nutrition. So eating cleaner and eating healthier has actually been way less expensive than eating the other way around. I have less crap in my cupboards and in my fridge and more real food that's supporting my body and keeping me healthy, even with all the damage that had been done when I didn't understand insulin resistance. Okay, let's come back down here. Um, Now, if I missed some questions, please re-ask them because I want to go over them. But understand this one protocol in a multitude of ways is helping you with insulin resistance and thereby helping with the blood pressure. This is also how people have been getting better liver labs. Remember, I mentioned kidneys, aldosterone, the RAAS, all of those reactive angiotensin, whatever, all that. All of this is being improved in a number of people throughout the world by just doing the Feel Great protocol and addressing their insulin resistance. It's powerful. It's in the PDR because it has enough science and clinical data behind it for it to be there. The PDR, it's prescriber's digital reference. It's where your doctors, where your pharmacists go to look up medications that you're being put on. We are some of the only real food products in the PDR. Okay, so your doctor can look it up there. Is type 2 an overabundance of insulin or under? It's an overabundance of insulin, Ursula. So let's take a look at that. Okay, if you're already type 2 diabetic. Oh, and I want, before I go into that, I want to say this. I ran into a woman the other day who had fatty liver, who had all this stuff that was like, okay, shoot. I mean, she's telling me all these things. And clearly to me, not a clinical person, not a doctor, but clearly to me, in a nutritional intervention, she has insulin resistance. So I started talking to her about that. And the first thing she said is, but I'm not obese. Do you know that insulin resistance does not always mean obesity? Okay. Insulin resistance, depending on how your fat cells grow, it does not mean obesity for everyone. I think about 30% of people with insulin resistance do not display obesity. So we can talk about some symptoms that might help you understand that. But Ursula, I see your question, so I want to address them. So LView, so the program has changed from a year ago. It's 2 T's a day now. And LView, yes, I want to talk to you. I'll talk to you about that. And Ursula, if you lack a gallbladder because you had gallstones, this is not that topic today, but there's two ways that your gallbladder produces gallstones. One is too much in sugar, and the other is a disruption in how your red blood cells interact. Okay, so if it wasn't the red blood cells, then it was insulin resistance. And the fact that you have so many other symptoms would say address your insulin resistance. Ursula, understand too, I don't have a gallbladder either. We didn't catch this in time. By the time we caught it and I started the system, I already had a multitude of stones in my gallbladder and some dislodged. And I thought it was food poisoning. And so I waited about 3 days in intense pain. And by the time I got to the doctor, they said I was about 2 hours from death. I was so septic. So they ended up pulling my gallbladder. So no, I don't have a gallbladder either. I still do the system. And actually, the system helps me manage all of that much better. Yes, I have to be careful of, man, if I get a hold of seed oils like canola oil, safflower oil, sunflower oil, all of those, I get sick immediately. And that's when I have gastritis attacks. If I'm talking about butter, ghee, avocado oil, extra virgin olive oil, I don't have those attacks like I do with the other ones. And I do eat quite a bit of fat because I want my heart healthy. But I don't overeat it. I just make sure that those are the sources I get it from and that I don't have seed oils. Now, when I go out to eat, it's really hard to address that. So I just try to choose places that I can be somewhat confident that they're not using a ton of seed oils. And I have to be careful about fried foods out, pizza out. All of those things are coated in those oils that can cause your gallbladder to start giving you gastritis attacks. I've also noticed, Ursula, that when I have too much sugar, I will have a gallbladder attack from the excess sugar. So, yeah, you're definitely obese. And so this can help you with getting the weight off too. I bought a book to eat by my blood type. I'm going to try it. Okay, yeah, I have that. I think I just packed the book up because we're getting ready to move again. But I have, it's Eat Right for Your Blood Type. Did you get that one? So, you guys, there's so much information out there, and unfortunately, we just haven't been taught right. Ro, I'm so glad you've done that. For me, I'm O positive. Okay. I'm O positive. There's no identify with. I am O positive. That means that, and when I look at my history, my ancestors are Native Americans from the Great Lake regions. Cranberries we had, and we had some other, foraged fruits, but not a lot, right? We predominantly ate a lot of red meat. Chicken was not part of our diet. Red meat and fish was. So that's where I lean into, and it doesn't, you guys, I'm going to say with the blood type, it doesn't necessarily mean positive or negative, but it's the A, B, or O that matters. And I had done an article on that. I just didn't get it posted yet. So why don't I try and post that article on Eat Right for Your Blood Type in my blog post this week, and then that will help. So A, I believe you are more vegan type of person, right? So A, B is a combination of, and I think B is more Mediterranean. I'm more versed on my specific blood type, so I did write an article to help explain that, and I'll get that put up. But if you guys can lean into that, I know this, like, I don't want to give everybody too much, but I want to give you enough that you can start to get healthy, right? So whether you're AB, or O, the Feel Great system can help you because we're helping reduce those blood sugars. Now, with proteins, you're going to get some glucose, okay? But it's not, and it's going to spike your insulin a little bit, not like it does with carbohydrates. And in my body, what I've begun to realize, I just did that 25-day program by Drew Logan, who had 3 heart attacks in a day and survived. What I realized in that, and doing all the little testing and the weird stuff that I do on myself, I started to recognize how very carb sensitive as an O blood type I am. I was eating predominantly meat, so I would have 1 meal of red meat and 1 meal of chicken or fish, and my ketones stayed great. The minute I added even in cabbage or broccoli, my blood sugars would spike and my ketones would drop, and all of that means that my insulin levels were popping back up. So although I take some breaks from doing that consistently, because I'm human, you guys, I love the sweet, good stuff too, right? But I just have to be careful and know that I can't have it all the time. So I'm about to start another 25 days on the system, which is just going to help me lean into retraining my body after 40 years of training it improperly to deal with the fuel that we eat. But absolutely, Ro, if you're O, you're probably more like me and need to lean more into red meats and fish. And then like AB is more of the like fish and chicken. And then I think A is vegan, but I'll have to look at the book and reread that article because I can't remember everything all the time. My 60-year-old brain is packed. It's packed. And so some of the stuff gets put away for storage and I got to pull it back out. Okay. So any questions on the heart and how this is all happening? That was really rapid fire, kind of going through all the symptoms and how the system is helping. Now, look, if you're interested in the system, understand that you can go to my profile link up here, tap on it. There's a white box going to come up below. Tap on that again. In my profile, there are 2 red light symbols. Right under it is a little link that will take you to my landing page. You can either text me to get information. You can look at my website and get information. You can just order the system and get started. When you order the system, you're going to get texts from me. You're going to have the ability to reach out to me. And I'm going to help you as much as I can along the way. That's the goal of doing this way, is that you actually have a real person to reach out to when you have questions, and somebody who's likely gone through the same things that you're suffering with now, and will probably understand what you're going through. So again, I'm not a doctor. I'm not a scientist. I wanted to be a doctor, but the opportunity came later in life, and I realized by the time I got done, I would be hanging up my hat, so I stopped. But I love the science, and I love understanding the root cause. It's just how my brain works. Not everybody has to do that. All you need to know is that it works. It works, and there's science behind why it works, and it's simple. So it's as simple as, you've been watching me drink my tea this morning. This is the tea. I'll have it this morning, and I sip on it, and we're going to talk about the difference. So I'll talk about the difference between a year ago and now. So that's the tea. One of the reasons we changed from 2 fiber and 1 tea is because we found a lot of people are doing OMAD, and they just would always end up with extra fiber and not enough tea. So then we also started doing some research and realizing that Unamate has way more benefits for our metabolism than we originally even understood, and that the fiber does more than we ever understood either. Remember, science keeps evolving, and the more we look, the more we find and know. So it's now a tea in the morning, a tea in the afternoon, and a fiber before the biggest meal of the day with carbohydrates in it. And that is how most people do it. Now, if you want to do 2 fiber in a day, great. I do 2 fiber plus another fiber force because I'm a fiber nut. I love what fiber does for my gut. Yes, I'm definitely 60 years old and taking up the role that my dad tried to teach me when he was this age and I was 30s and didn't want to hear him. But so that's it. I put this fiber in this water. Now I'm going to shake it up. So now I'm going to drink this down really quick before it gets too thick. That's the fiber. Now, when we originally started this whole process, the fiber had studies on it, and we originally said 10 to 15 minutes before a meal would reduce a blood glucose spike by 20%. That science is still really valid. But what they found now, and partly spiked because people were saying I can't do it 10 to 15 minutes before I have this really busy, hectic lifestyle. So they started doing more research, and what they found is that uh-oh. TikTok verify. There we go. Okay, so what they found is that when we drink that fiber with the meal, like I just drank it, I'm not going to eat for a few hours, it's fine. I'm going to explain why. But when you drink the fiber with a meal, which I'll do before I eat, it reduces a blood sugar spike by up to 37% as opposed to taking it 10 to 15 minutes before the meal. So now we're understanding that it has a greater effect on our blood sugar than we ever thought, especially when taken with the meal. Now, there's no study on this part, so I'm just going to be correlationally putting some stuff together, okay? So in the things that I've looked at, now, I've talked about how Unimate actually helps with insulin sensitivity, and that's one of the great keys. But it's also helping with satiety and mood, which are extremely important in this addressing what we crave and how much we overeat. But the fiber. So when we look at a single source fiber, and there have been multiple studies on a single source fiber, and what these multiple studies looked at is having one serving of that meal, that source fiber before their first meal of the day, reduced a blood sugar spike by about 10%. So, do I want a 10% reduction in blood glucose, or do I want a 37% reduction in blood glucose? I want a 37% reduction. I don't want to take 4 times as much as this. I don't want to take that at all. I want to take this, which is 7 different soluble and insoluble fibers. By the way, I'm not even sure that 4 times the amount of this would do what this does because it's a one source fiber, and this has a variety, a matrix of fibers for a specific reason. Now, what science, other studies, not from Unicity, has shown also is that, so in this study, they were having 3 meals a day, these studies. The one was doing the fiber before breakfast and then not having fiber before lunch, but then having it again at dinner. So 10% reduction at breakfast when they had the fiber before, and then fiber without having it at lunchtime, as opposed to a group who was not getting in this excess fiber. Their blood sugar spike was reduced by 50 to 60% 4 to 5 hours later. Okay. So then they had a second fiber before their dinner meal, and that reduced the blood sugar spike by about 30%. So 2 fibers in a day of the single source by the one meal was reducing it still less than this one does in front of our first meal, and we're only eating 2 meals a day. Fibroids are directly caused by insulin resistance. And yes, I did an article on that. I have to hop on a call here in a minute. Why don't I write that down? And let's talk about fibroids tomorrow. I talked about it a little bit last week, but I'll explain some mechanisms as to how insulin resistance is causing those fibroids. And so you can understand that how to get off of, get relief from those as well. So that's a great question, Cloney, and I would love to answer. Can you join me tomorrow morning? Because I do have to hop on a call here, and my phone's about to die, and TikTok is saying it's about time for me to get off. Yeah, it's all connected, and I'll explain why it's connected. And so the same thing with this. If you are doing this to address the insulin resistance, then in my mind, it's so I want to be clear. The company is telling you that this helps insulin resistance. I'm linking in all the other stuff because I noticed that it all got better for me when I just made this change. So then it got me thinking, why did all of that change in my health when this was all I changed in my diet at first? And so I started looking up all of these things. Why did my skin tags get better? Why did I get rid of the dark skin color patches on my elbows? No more dark skinned elbows, no more scratchy and peeling and rough elbows, no more rough elbows or knees or dark patches under my arms or in my groin. Those are all symptoms of insulin resistance. No more skin tags anywhere on my system. That's a symptom of insulin resistance. My eyesight's gotten better. My bleeding teeth and gums got better. My IBS got better. I had a knee that was supposed to be replaced 2 years ago that no longer needs to be replaced because the cartilage has been rebuilding because of reduced inflammation and oxidative stress and reduced insulin sensitivity and reduced insulin resistance, increased insulin sensitivity. So much. I'm here talking about it because almost everything on that list was me. And this one system, after years of working with doctors, working with and seeing multiple different doctors, nobody was able to get it under control. And I took a chance on this system and it changed everything. Then I started helping other people with the same thing. And now I have friends around the world who are telling me how much better their health is, how much I have people who've been on the system almost as long as me. And they refuse to stop because they know how much this has changed their health. You guys, our food today does not have the nutrients in it that we need in order to stay healthy. Some of those nutrients are fiber. Especially when we're looking at high carbohydrate foods, we must have fiber to address the glucose spikes, and we're not getting that. That's why the system is working. It's plain, it's simple, and we're addressing the root cause instead of throwing a pill at it. And most of the people who are on those pills or shots are ending up taking more and more and more, and over time as their body is just not responding to it anymore. Nutrition is key. So we talked a little bit about eat right for your blood type. We talked a little bit about a number of things. And then one person was saying they're afraid to eat. Look, when I started, until I started getting things under control, this is what happened for me. And I still got results. I want you to understand this. I was driving for Lyft and Uber during the pandemic. There was very little open. I was in my car 8 to 10 hours. And if you've ever done that job, you know that when it's time to eat or when you're hungry, you might not even be near anything, much less home to have food. I was ferrying people from the airport and from the bars, and oftentimes people were trying to put too many people in the car. And I had no place to keep or store food in the car because I had to keep every space for these customers. So I stopped off at McDonald's or Jack in the Box were the two places that were open. Even gas stations were closed inside. So in that 8 to 10 hours, oftentimes what I ate was something from McDonald's or Jack in the Box, one meal a day. And then the other meal when I was home, I tried to do better. And I had, real food at home that I tried to cook and have for that second meal. Um, but that's how I ate for the first 5 to 6 months. And I still lost 55 pounds, got rid of my skin tags, got rid of the skin discoloration, got my eyesight coming back, got my bleeding teeth and gums to stop, had joint relief, had all of these things happen to me in those first 5 to 6 months while still having a very imperfect diet. Now, do I advocate for you to eat crap all the time? No, I don't. But my grandson was over. He's going to leave in about 3 weeks, and then it's going to be about 3 to 4 months before I get out there to where they are, and I'm going to miss him. He's like an appendage to me. He's like part of me. And he wanted pizza. It was his birthday last week, and he wanted to go to Chuck E. Cheese. And I know a lot of people like, oh, hell no. It's changed a bit. It's better. But yeah, we went to Chuck E. Cheese. We had cupcakes. We had pizza. And I didn't worry about it. I just had the drink beforehand and the energy to deal with him in Chuck E. Cheese and to help my ADD with all the bells and whistles and all the crud and the kids and stuff screaming. The Unimate was in my cup. That's it. Helps with my mental anxiety and depression, helps with glucose absorption so that I'm getting energy to my cells. And that's part of how it's shutting down hunger. So it's giving clues to your brain to shut down hunger. It's helping some gut distension to shut down hunger. but it's just getting energy into your cells. And hunger, guys, hunger is just a clue that your body cells need energy. And if they're resistant to insulin, you're eating more, they're still not taking it in. Insulin is delivering this energy to cells that will take it in or to the fat cells, and then you're left with an energy deficit and you want to eat again. Snickers bar, bag of chips, soda pop, something to get your energy back up. And then you're stuck in this negative cycle where you're getting sicker and sicker and sicker. Stop that cycle and you can start to feel better. And that's really what the system does. It allows me to stop that cycle, get energy into my cells so I'm not feeling the constant hunger. Now I can manage it much easier because I couldn't manage it before. I tried and tried and tried, and I don't know how many of the rest of you feel this way, but I just could not manage my hunger enough to do intermittent fasting before. Not in today's world with all the stress and the demands and stuff. I just felt like it was almost impossible. This made it easy for me. I'll talk about fasting later this week because there's some information on fasting and how good it is for the heart. So that's part of the protocol. We do a 16-8 fast. And all that means is if I had dinner last night at 6, and what did I have for dinner last night? Oh, that's right. I didn't want to cook. I was tired, so I stopped at Wawa's, a gas station here, and I got a bowl. I made sure I didn't have any rice in it. It was black beans, chicken, steak, some bacon, salsa, sour cream, guacamole, chipotle sauce. That was my dinner last night. Yum, amazing, high in protein, some fats in there, some other components. I still had my balance beforehand, but that was my dinner at about 6 o'clock. So now it's 10 a.m. I'm already 16 hours fasted and I'm not hungry. I have some phone calls and some meetings to get into. Then at noon, I have another meeting, but I'll be fine and I'll have my meal when all of that's done. And guess what? How I'm going to survive that is just having this tea. I drank that balance. By the way, the tea doesn't break my fast and the balance doesn't break my fast. The balance, and I love to talk about this because I asked Dr. Bickman before everybody else was talking about it because I did some sciencey stuff, almost said a bad word, on myself. And what I realized was in a fasted state, I did some long-term fast to see how my body was affected by different foods. But I drank the balance 3 days into it in a fast, and my ketones actually doubled. So yes, I drank this in a fasted state. It does not break my fast. In fact, what happens when I drink this, and this is why I still drink 2 to 3 a day, is that it boosts my ketones because the probiotics in my gut are feeding on the prebiotics in this. And when they feed on that, it creates short chain fatty acids. Those short chain fatty acids ketones, and now I'm in a fat burning state. This helps me stay in the fat burning state regardless of fasting or not. Okay, so both products I can have during a fasted state and I'm fine, and I'm actually supporting my body with nutrition in a fasted state. And now that the balance is in my gut, even if I was starting to feel hungry, this is gelling up and expanding in my gut and helping me have that little bit of gut distension beyond what the tea is giving me so that I don't have hunger. And it's as simple as that. All the while, instead of getting in medications that aren't really contributing to my health, I'm getting in nutrients, vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, anti-cancer, anti-inflammatory, blood sugar regulation, prebiotics for my probiotics, phytosterols for my heart. All of that just went in my body, and it's feeding me in a way that regular food hasn't been able to for years. Okay. Guys, I do have to hop off and get on a call. I will talk about fibroids tomorrow. We'll talk about fasting later this week. It was a little different format for the heart information, so I stumbled a little bit because it's just not the same as I normally talk about. But I wanted you to understand all of these mechanisms, and there are more, that insulin resistance is causing hypertension. Again, I want to wrap up with the reason I talk about hypertension so much is that I suffered with it. It was a real part of my life. It was really terrifying, yes. So if you're suffering with hypertension and you're feeling that heart rate change and you're feeling that pressure in your chest, and and I want you to know that do not ignore that. This is my one big message, even to my own family. If you have any kind of hypertension, do not ignore it because it will, long term hypertension will weaken and cause problems with your heart. And that's not something you want to live with. So address it now. And even if it has been going on and it has weakened your heart, then you can start stopping it now. And that does not require a ton of medications. Again, caveat, work with your physician, but it requires understanding what caused it in the first place so that you can start to reverse that. So my diabetes type 2 has been reversed. There's my A1C is 5.3. My lipids are all in normal range. I'm good. But now I'm just dealing with the damage that was done to my body when no physician, nutritionist, gym guy could help me out with my body. Okay. So I even had a doctor call me into her office that I worked for in a hormone clinic. And she said, "There's nothing I can do to help you." Somebody who specialized in hormones couldn't tell me anything about insulin, glucagon, cortisol, why all of this was running rampant in my system. And she did. All right, she didn't. The system did. So, all right, you guys, I'll see you in the morning. And then, you guys, thank you for commenting this morning. Thanks for asking your questions. It's so important that you guys get those questions answered. And then, if you want to work with me and you want to get this done, please just use my link in order. I would be more than happy to have you as a part of my family tribe and get you healthier than you thought you could be. And that's the goal. So, we'll see you tomorrow. And thanks again, you guys. Have a great day.